Good afternoon. My name is Latasha Moore, and I work here at the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality. I've been with this company for 10 years and currently work in the Hazardous Waste Division. Today, I will be informing you all of an oil spill that occurred in a town just 25 miles north of us in Mayflower, Arkansas. My goal is to inform you why further actions need to be taken in reference to the effects that the spill had on the town and townspeople. Let's start off with some background information. So, what happened in Mayflower? During the afternoon of March 29, 2013, a pipeline burst in the Northwood subdivision of Mayflower. The pipeline is referred to as Pegasus and runs throughout Arkansas from the northeast to southwest corners. It was constructed during the 1940s and is said to have burst due to not being well maintained throughout the years. There are several different estimates as to how much oil actually leaked. This is not the first time that I will be mentioning an inconsistency in information about the incident. During my conversation with Mayor Randy Holland, he informed me that there was no official emergency plan prior to the spill. As a matter of fact, the spill caused the town to develop a plan that ended up being used the next year during another emergency, a tornado that occurred and ravaged the town in 2014. Nevertheless, although there was no official plan, the town administrators and other officials did the best they could during the spill. For example, a command center was set up, which was the hub of communication. Now, the mayor and first responders notified residents that they needed to leave. However, this only applies to residents of Northwoods. No other Mayflower residents were required or encouraged to go. So, who exactly was evacuated? The Northwood subdivision consists of about 60 homes. It is not large. The homes are fairly close together and simply 5 streets run through the enclosed community. However, only 22 homes were mandatorily evacuated. Only the residents that had oil on their property were required to leave. The select 22 were put in homes or the homes of family, friends, or church members. Those that were placed in hotels had the expenses covered by ExxonMobil for a while. Resident Amber Bartlett stated the company informed her that she and her family would no longer be funded by them to stay in a hotel after September 15th of 2013. So they were only able to stay on Exxon's dime for a few months, and after that were encouraged by the company to return to their home in Northwood. All right, so what happened in the days that followed the spill? Well, school was immediately back in session afterwards. So the spill happened on a Friday and school was back on a Monday. Now, I don't think this was smart at all, but of course I wasn't over that decision. But as a public health practitioner, I definitely do not think this was wise because one or two of the Mayflower schools are about maybe half a mile or less from the subdivision where the spill occurred. And the fumes were extremely strong there, as reports have stated. And my interview with one of the teachers also mentions this. Now, as many of you all already know, the use or the body of a young person is really sensitive, really susceptible to illness and breaking down because their systems are underdeveloped. And so, as the teacher mentioned in our interview, which I will discuss later, it'll be mentioned later, during the children would still be able to go out for recess and they would smell the fumes, and it was just really apparent. It wasn't as though they were given masks and things of that nature as a precautionary measure. So school was right back in session, and I'm sure that has or will contribute to the students' health. From my understanding, the scent only persisted in the town for a couple weeks, but any level of an exposure, or depending on the level, especially for the period of time, can have great effects. But nonetheless, school was back in session. The superintendent, John Gray, said this was done to provide a sense of normalcy as not to cause alarm. According to the mayor, town administrators and organization officials worked 15-hour days and had 3 to 4 meetings a day. But when I say meetings, I don't mean meetings for the public. The one public meeting took place the day after the spill in the high school cafeteria, and Exxon was in attendance. However, after this meeting, it seems as though there were no more official ones. Citizens started to organize their own. Resident, or possibly former resident, I don't know if he moved, Scott Crow stated that when Exxon and other organization representatives were in town and citizens would try to ask questions, the officials pushed them away. So residents started to gather on their own and piece the puzzles together as best they could. Sure, I'm guessing it wasn't as beneficial as an official meeting would have been, but they would share their own personal experiences and discuss newspaper articles they had read that provided information. Now I will discuss how oil is cleaned and the kind of oil that was leaked during the spill. Oil is cleaned in a variety of ways that include the methods listed. The most common manner, and the one used in the Mayflower spill, is manual recovery. The spill was cleaned by using vacuum tanks, storage or frac tanks, steam cleaning, and booms. So what kind of oil was actually used or leaked in the spill? Well, this is another instance where reports were inconsistent. Various articles use different terms to describe it. It's been referred to as tar sands, Wabasca heavy crude, and dilbit. If you Google each of these terms, these same images come up. So in this presentation, for clarity, I will be referring to the oil as tar sands oil. What is tar sands oil? This oil is a combination of water, sand, and bitumen. Bitumen is what is extracted from the mixture to make the oil. It is a combination of hydrocarbons such as nickel, vanadium, nitrogen, and oxygen and sulfur. As aforementioned, the average oil release in a spill is extremely difficult to clean. It requires several methods, and tar sands oil is even more difficult to clean. Bitumen is also referred to as asphalt, so tar sands oil likely has a consistency similar to concrete. It is so dense and thick that it has to be chemically altered in order to be transferable by pipe. This alteration is known as upgrading and occurs after the mixture has been extracted from deep beneath the Earth's surface. The material safety data sheet for bitumen lists the occurrence of these illnesses as a result of inhaled exposure to the chemical. The words in red are sicknesses that Mayflower residents have complained they've experienced due to the spill. The material safety data sheets also reveal that the bitumen mixture has a rating of 3 by the International Agency on Research for Cancer. Their rating scale goes from 1 to 4, and a rating of 3 means the evidence for bitumen's carcinogenicity is inadequate in humans. This does not mean the chemical is non-carcinogenic or safe, but rather that further research needs to be conducted. Now let's discuss how the spill impacted the health of residents. Former Mayflower resident Ann Jarrell spoke at the Pipeline Safety Trust Conference just a few months after the spill. During her talk, she revealed how the oil spill impacted the health of her and her family.
I have had multiple health issues. My thyroid levels were high for both TSH and T4 levels. I had headaches so bad I would wake up crying in the middle of the night. My eyes were so blurry I was afraid of driving. I was coughing so much that I lost my voice. I felt lightheaded, could not remember or articulate my thoughts, and had to cancel a training class because I just could not teach. I could think up here what I wanted to say, but I couldn't say it.
Ms. Jarrell goes on in this video to say that a few months later, after the incident, her physician demanded that she not return to her home, and she followed his advice. So she ended up paying for a home that she couldn't even live in. Ms. Jarrell isn't the only resident who had a health complaint. As you can see here, a variety of residents complained of problems with breathing, some with sleeping, and others just the severe odor that the spill left. Unlike Jarrell and the other residents that I just mentioned in the previous slide, not everyone had complaints, but it seems as though just about everyone had concerns. Yolanda Ryan is the educator that I mentioned earlier in the presentation. She lives about 4 miles outside of Mayflower, so the oil spill it may not have impacted her in the same way that it did those who live in the inner parts of town. She's a native of Mayflower and reports there have been no health problems in relation to the spill. However, she was so concerned that she moved her children to school in another town. They were going to Mayflower where she teaches, but due to her concerns about the health effects it was having on them, she took them elsewhere. Now we'll discuss how the environmental quality was analyzed and evaluated. There were a variety of organizations that came out to assist when the spill occurred. Those involved in the environmental quality were the organizations listed: ADEQ, CTE, and the EPA. The organizations provided so much information. For the brevity of this presentation, I will simply highlight how groups measured the quality of the air and water. CTE measured the quality of air on a consistent basis from March to May. This graph shows the quantities of specific elements in the work area, which I take to mean the Northwood subdivision. Out of the elements that were detected, hydrogen sulfide and VOCs, or volatile organic compounds, had the highest concentrations. Here are the exposure limits for hydrogen sulfide. I did not include exposure limits for the VOCs because VOCs, well, that term encompasses 30 plus chemicals, so I would have had to find exposure limits for each one. But by looking at the exposure limits for hydrogen sulfide, we see that through each organization standard, OSHA, ACIG, H, and NEOSH, what was found in Mayflower in March exceeded their recommended parts per million limit. Now here we see that just a few months later in May, the concentrations of hydrogen sulfide and VOCs were so low that they weren't detected. The average concentration says NA, and so if you look over in the other two left columns, you'll see the count of readings. There are 47 readings, but those items were never detected. We, ADEQ, measured water quality. Our first analysis was conducted on April 9th, about a week and a half after the incident, and at the time we found that 7 metals surpassed the ecological screening levels. And all those levels mean, or all they are an evaluation of risk assessment and how dangerous a chemical is to the environment. The metals that were above screening levels, there were about 9 of them. But then, if we flip to the next slide, we'll see that 2 years later, within 2 years, the number of metals were decreased and the levels at which they were found decreased also. Mayflower has 2 medical facilities, Our Care and Conway Regional, which has a Mayflower clinic there. The personnel at Our Care appeared to be a bit hesitant to thoroughly discuss the health effects of residents with me. I went by in person and asked to speak with an APN, but they had the secretary respond to me on their behalf, and all I was simply told is that no, an APN doctor or no medical personnel there had noticed any health effects in their patients related to the spill. However, Conway Regional appears to be more forthcoming, although they were not available for comment by the time I needed to put this presentation together. I am scheduled to discuss the health effects with them at a later date. So let's review. Over 100,000 gallons of oil was spilled. Only 22 of the 60 plus homes in the Northwoods community were evacuated, so that's about 1/3. There was no formal evacuation plan. The tar sands oil, which is what spilled, is very thick and it's not the average oil, so it's not going to have the average health effects. Bitumen, which is a part of tar sands oil, is linked to several negative health effects, and many residents of Mayflower complained of these specific health problems. Some even moved. The air and water assessments that we have are fairly dated. Nothing in this year of 2016. There's quite a bit of public distrust, or was a bit of public distrust, on how residents felt the situation was handled and how they were informed. And there also were several miscommunications in the amount of oil spilled. There are a lot of different numbers. And the kinds of oil spilled, several different terms used. And even in the number of people evacuated. That's why I put this picture up. This made the news, and that caption states that 40 homes were evacuated, but that's not accurate. It's 22. So here are my recommendations and praises. I desire to include praises because I just don't want to only beat up on those involved in the decision-making process. My recommendation for the administration of Mayflower, also the Arkansas Department of Health, and even us, the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality, is that greater follow-up needs to be done. An epidemiologic study needs to be conducted. It's been about 3 years since the spill occurred, which is enough time to assess how how residents were before in reference to the health and how they are now, and to do a thorough investigation. From my research of this issue, it has not been done. The only reports and studies I've seen dealt with environmental quality. There needs to be ongoing air and water assessments, as I've shown in my presentation today. The last time air quality was measured was May of 2013. The last time water quality was measured was in June 2015. So is that to say that these mediums and their statuses only matter up to this point? No, they matter now. Also, statements or evaluations by doctors. And here I mean publicly, because in my research I always came across residents' feedback or residents' complaints. A few officials, like someone on behalf of Exxon or someone on behalf of the Arkansas Department of Health, but I never came across words from the doctors. And I think that would help bring this issue to, in a 360 manner, in a complete way, and discuss it in its entirety. Because doctors have histories, and they really know what's been going on with the resident. Well, I thank you all for your patience, and I greatly apologize for the length. I do realize that I've gone over my time, but I just get kind of enthused when discussing this issue. I've done an extensive amount of research, and I want to give you all everything I got. So excuse me for going over, but my name is Latasha Moore, and I thank you for your time. On this slide are my credentials. If you ever want to talk to me, here's my email address and my phone number, and I will stay around after at this event to answer a few questions. So thank you, and have a great evening.